So, Destiny, what I want to ask you about is the thought problems that people are having. And I'll give you an example. So, why is the country so polarized? Some people hate Trump, think he's going to destroy democracy, that if we elect Trump, our democracy is over. And some people think if we don't elect Trump, our democracy is over. With Israel-Palestine, some people who are on the far pro-Israel side believe that people who are pro-Palestine are necessarily anti-Semitic, and some people who are pro-Palestine think that people who are pro-Israel are necessarily pro-genocide. So, what's going on? Where's the middle ground? Why do you think there is this type of not just polarization, but total demonization of people who don't share your own views? Not you, but the people. Yeah.
I mean, I think the big issue is we don't live in the same factual reality anymore. It's very easy for people to pick and choose which facts they want to believe in. And it's very easy for people to pick and choose which facts they want to present for a given thing. Whether you're talking about Trump and January 6th, you can get opinions all the way from it was a coup and an insurrection, that culminated on January 6th and tried to have Trump overthrow the election, all the way to it was a couple of old grandmas wandering through the Capitol building and nothing of note really happened.
How is that though? Don't we have news? Don't we have information? I don't get it.
So again, it's if I could ever just stress one thing to people just don't work in a way that is for processing truth. That's not what we're designed to do. We're designed to survive and reproduce. That's it. People ask these questions and they go, how can you believe the wrong stuff when all the right stuff is out there? It's like looking at a fat population and going, how can you guys be fat when there's so much healthy food out there?
Don't you think people are somewhat designed to find truth? I mean, that's how the human species survived. We're smarter than other species, right? It's our critical thinking that's helped us get where we are, right?
We're social creatures that can utilize language and tools. As long as we can be better than all the other creatures, which we are by far, that's enough. We don't have to be better than each other. We don't have to beat our own environments. And there are some ways where sometimes believing in untruthful things or false things, can make us feel better and can increase, social cohesion and all that. It just depends on it depends on the particular thing. But as long as you think that the human mind is geared automatically towards seeking truth, the current media environment is indecipherable. Every piece of information that you could ever want to know is out there on the internet. So how could you ever not know what's, actually the matter of the fact about a particular thing or the fact of the matter about a particular thing?
What's the biggest fallacy or mistake that you think people are making right now in terms of their reasoning? I mean, you've explained why people feel differently because they're given different information. So what do you think is the biggest error that people are making? Is it the conservatives?
I think it's what I just said. Or who is it? I think that who is it is, I think conservatives are uniquely mind blown right now in terms of figuring stuff out online, but it really depends on the issue. Like progressives or people on the left can be super mind blown on issues as well. The issue is what I said about people assuming that their brains are designed for truth. You can go into a bunch of different logical fallacies and what's a good way to, appropriately vet things. But the reality is I think most people actually have a pretty intuitive grasp on how to do this. And you can tell because as soon as you stick something that a person is critical of in front of them, all of a sudden they seem to remember all of the, critical thinking skills that they were taught in grade school. I can talk to a conservative, for instance, about ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, and they'll talk about how these are miracle drugs and they're really good, and we got scammed with the vaccines and all this. And it's like, okay, where's your evidence for this? And they're like, well, without getting too deep into it, the answer is nothing really, nothing good. But then as soon as you bring up trans medication or whatever, or puberty blockers for minors, well, now all of a sudden conservatives have become, skeptical scientists. They're like, well, I'm going to need to see some prospective, double-blind, randomized control trials. These are the gold standards of medicine. I'm going to need to make sure that the sample size, that the attrition rates are good. All of a sudden, it's like, holy shit, wait, you know everything about medical research. Where was this criticism when it came time to evaluate the ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine studies, And there are examples on the left as well. It's just, selective skepticism.
Selective skepticism. So when they want to believe something, they're less likely to interrogate it,
exactly,
or to look at contra evidence.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the reasons why people want to believe something that might be false?
Makes them feel good. Yeah, makes you feel good. You got a group of people that you like. You got a group of people that you identify with. They all believe the same thing. It's like when you root for a sports team. You can find some dude that you don't really know well, but you're in a bar together and you guys are cheering for the same team, and you might even know some of the same stories and some of the same myths, Like with Israel-Palestine, you've got common stories and common myths. You might know some of the coaches, some of the quarterbacks, an athletic coordinator. You might have like all this shared stuff, some generals, some prime ministers, Arafat, Ben Gurion. Like it's the same thing. It's sports, it's politics, it's social media, it's whatever. Like, yeah, we like to find people that are part of our kind of tribe, and then we like to find how we can relate to them, and then we like to bully the other tribe because they're the out group. And yeah.
Do you think you have any biases?
Yeah, of course.
Like what?
There are people that I don't like. There are narratives that I like that reinforce my point of view. Yeah, I mean, we can get specific if you want.
Yeah, let's get specific.
Yeah, sure. So, I guess, like, say, for instance, this example I give a lot when I'm talking about Joe Rogan, right? Joe Rogan might have a guy on his show that might be anti-Israeli or anti-vaccination or something, right? When I go to listen to this, I know that I don't like, generally, Joe Rogan's takes politically, and I know I'm probably not going to like what his guest has to say. I'll write that down. I'll write down, like, I don't like these people. Because what that means is that when I start writing down claims of theirs that I don't think are true, I'm being extra careful because I know that I don't like what these people say, and I know I don't like the people. I'm probably not going to like what they say. I might, like, trick myself into thinking they're incorrect on something just because I'm being extra critical because I don't want to believe anything that they're saying. So rather than, like, trying to be the kind of guy who's like, I try to correct all my biases and make sure I live with no biases, I just try to be aware of them. And then I try to develop kind of these external mechanisms to hold myself accountable when I'm trying to evaluate people's, speeches or whatever data or whatever. Yeah.
So you're consciously fighting against your biases.
Yeah. I think you have to. Anybody that says differently is a liar or is just unaware of how the human mind works. Yeah.
So you do seek truth. I mean, some humans do seek truth, right? Some people like yourself, you're describing like it's not this innate thing for people to seek truth. People want to seek survival. Mm-hmm. People want to feel good. How do you square that? Maybe it's a stupid question, but it's like we have the capability of being critical thinking, but it's not our first instinct. Is that the conclusion?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, we can do it. We've got like super great rational minds. I'm rewarded handsomely for it at this point in my career because I built a whole like ecosystem around kind of my reputation and what I do. Other than that, I'm a little unique in that I don't mind being kind of on my own for a lot of stuff. I don't belong to any major communities. I don't have like a lot of other political commentators or streamers in my corner, polling for me. There's a lot of stuff there that's really hard for a lot of online people to deal with. So I think I'm pretty uniquely suited to deal with that. So because of those things, I'm able to kind of like head down that path with a bit more epistemic humility, I guess, than some of my colleagues.
Yeah. Let's talk about Israel-Palestine. When did you start learning and diving into the conflict?
Probably after October 7th.
And since your debate with Finkelstein, or since returning from Israel, have your views changed at all?
Not significantly, no.
Do you think they will change? And this is what I mean by, and another way to phrase that is, how confident are you on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being certain that your views are correct and are not being influenced by any biases you have?
Pretty confident. I'd say I'm anywhere from like, depending on how specific you want to get, I'd say anywhere from like 6 to 7.5. I'm pretty confident.
And got it. Just because of your research and you feel... But
I mean, it's a wide range of stuff to know. So I'm not going to say like a 9 or a 10 or whatever as a kind of a layman. So yeah.
Sure. And just a little bit about me, quick story about who I am. My sister was killed in 2018. I went on a religious journey. I tried to become an Orthodox Jew. I lived with the rabbi and his 7 kids before going to a yeshiva in Israel, all while I was working full time. And I really bought into the ideology. And then a year later, I snapped out of it, became non-religious, met and married a Syrian Christian girl, and moved to Los Angeles. So I grew up secular, very much educated to support Israel, and through this trauma, I became religious and then not religious, and now my bias. I mean, I was raised with this bias towards Israel, and I've really fought against that to be thinking more critically. And I have a bias towards really wanting to, I really want to be understanding and empathetic towards the Palestinian cause. And my take is that there are smart, well-meaning, good faith people on both sides. Maybe not Finkelstein, but Ilan, Pappe, Gideon Levy, really smart folks who know their stuff. And it's an issue where you can have compelling arguments on both sides. But fundamentally, I'm still just trying to figure it out. So what are your views? It's kind of a long question, but in a nutshell, what are your views about Israel-Palestine?
I think that
we're in an elevator. We're going up. I'm getting off on the 10th floor. We're on the first floor. You got 9 floors.
9 floors.
And I say, what's your view on Israel-Palestine?
Israelis and Palestinians have very different histories of the same region that they tell themselves and they try to tell the rest of the world. I think that both histories provide ample reason for both sides to feel like they are infinitely justified in aggressing on and against the other side, and that they have infinite justification to the land or more that they currently inhabit. And I think that the Israeli story is a lot more close to the truth than the Palestinian one is.
Why is that?
Why do I think that, or why do I think?
Yeah, why do you think that?
I think that when you look historically through what's actually happened, I think that when you're honest and accounting for what's going on, I think that the Israeli truth, the Israeli narrative, tends to be more accurate than the Arab or the Palestinian one. Although we can, depending on how deep you want to go, we can qualify that because there are some really bad Israeli narratives out there as well, though. So
yeah, I mean, it can all be true, right? Like I also think that it's possible for you or someone to be, quote, pro-Israel and still condemn and hate how they're conducting themselves in the war or in the West Bank or in Gaza. I mean, one of my issues with trying to categorize this argument is when someone says pro-Israel or pro-Palestine, what does that mean exactly? And I think in your view, what it means is the record of history is more favorable towards the Israelis. So what are the main arguments or data or pieces of evidence that make you say that? Is it the record of attempted peace treaties that Israel has put forward? Man,
you're asking me for summarizing a lot of stuff. So
I'm gonna
think of the main historical beats.
The elevator broke. The
elevator broke. Okay, but we got firefighters are coming. Okay, they're on their way though.
Yeah.
So the main historical beats. So I would say that the first major point of contention has to do with the Kingdom of Israel and then the spread of the Islamic caliphates through the Middle East, in North Africa and Southern Europe and Southeast Asia. People seem to want to selectively draw from who was in the Levant or in the Palestinian region or in the Israeli region. People want to draw selectively from that. Jewish people lean very heavily into the Kingdom of Israel. Palestinians lean very heavily into the caliphates, and people will selectively start history wherever they want. The reality is there is no reality where we don't acknowledge that Jewish people were there first. That's ridiculous to say otherwise. And there's no reality where we say that Palestinians or Arabs weren't spread across during the caliphates up to and through the Ottoman Empire and the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, right? That's true. Both people should be able to accept that. Some people will fight really hard on even that point using genetic studies or other types of weird things. But that's point number one. I think that it's totally irrelevant to the solution today to focus on those things, but some people want to root their arguments back there. So that's one point. The second point is the origination of how, or rather the start of Jewish people coming to the Levant, starting with the first Aliyah in the 1880s. People disagree on whether or not Jews had a right to move there. Your narratives range all the way from Jewish people fairly purchased land and paid, Palestinian farmers that left, or there weren't even any there, an empty land for a people. Oh, there's a famous quote. I can't believe I'm not remembering it right now. But Jewish people sometimes would say,
what they would say is a land for a people. A land without people for a people without a land.
That was it. Yeah.
But that's a fallacy, right? You don't believe that?
No, I'm saying that's the farthest Israeli story is all the way to that.
Right.
And then the farthest Palestinian story is like, Jewish people were fleeing the Holocaust and we welcomed them from the very start with open arms until they stabbed us in the back. Neither of these stories are true at all. There were Arabs, Palestinians living throughout this region that lived there and farmed there, and were back there for generations. They didn't all just come in response to the first or second or third wave of Jewish immigrants that didn't start in the early 1900s. They'd been there for a long time. But Palestinians absolutely did not welcome Israeli people there. That's also a lie. They fought very heavily, especially up through the 30s, up through 36 until or 39, I think, until the Arab Revolt ended. The next big beat is the Nakba, where you've got people on the one side. I don't even know how to two sides the Nakba. The stories range from basically Jews, like bloodthirsty Jewish dogs, ravaged the lands and expelled, and cleansed all these Palestinian poor people for absolutely no reason. Jewish people will say it was entirely a war of self-defense, and they didn't actually, there were no massacres. They didn't blow up a single village. Like, the people just left on their own because they whatever. The truth is very much in between those two. Your next major beat is going to be the 67 war. No, actually, your next major beat would actually probably be the Suez Crisis, I think in 56 with Egypt and Israel. Your next major beat is going to be the 67 war, where people disagree a lot over who started it, right? You said you've talked to Ilan Pappe. I'm not sure what his stance is on it, but it wouldn't surprise me if he believes that Israel started that war for absolutely no reason because they just wanted to grab a bunch of land. And he'll point to the fact that Israel did strike first. He'll probably point to the fact that, CIA intelligence, I think, said that, the Arabs would have no way of winning that war. He probably pointed to the fact that Israel didn't even admit to starting that war first in a surprise attack, I think until weeks after it ended. And then on the other side, you've got the fact that, the Egyptian leader Nasser was saying insane stuff all over the planet about how they were going to, end Israel in a fateful war.
Where do you and Ilan Pappe disagree? Like, where do you and Ilan Pappe disagree?
I think Pappe probably buys in a little bit too much to the Palestinian narrative and doesn't seem to give enough credence to the Israeli narrative, would be my guess.
Why do you think where do you think he's wrong? Like, which data of his do you think is wrong?
So I'm uncomfortable being hypercritical of Pappe because I haven't gone through his books like I have Finkelstein. I know that Finkelstein cites him a lot. The most precise fact that I know that is hotly contested with Pappe is the translation of a very old, I think, Ben Gurion diary entry about, I think it was about expelling Arabs from the Palestinian region, from the mandatory Palestine area. And I think the way that he translates it by relying on some like scribbled out text, I think other scholars have fought with him, I think, a lot about. I think Avi Schleim and I think Benny Morris have written, I think, back and forth. Don't quote me 100% on that though. But Pappe seems to be the go-to like citation that people will give when talking about these things. And I'll disagree with how it's brought up when it's brought up like in a Finkelstein book, but I haven't gone through an Ilan Pappe book enough to say like, oh, like I would disagree with them on all these facts here. It could be that Pappe is just cited very aggressively by bad faith people, and maybe his opinion is actually more reasonable than I know. So yeah.
Because here's something I just don't understand. Maybe you can help me understand. How is it that with this conflict, Israel-Palestine, you have, tell me if you'd agree with this, you have smart, educated, good faith people on both sides. Not that everyone is good faith on both sides, but you have smart, educated, good faith people on both sides. Let's call Ilan Pappe someone like that on the pro-Palestine side. And let's call yourself someone like that on the pro-Israel side. So how is it that people who are genuinely seeking truth have no consensus on the reality? Like, how is it that these two narratives where we can't align on a single set of facts?
If they're truly both good faith people, there should be almost total alignment on the facts, and where there should be divergence might be on some conclusions about those facts and interpretations of those facts. So, for instance, it is inarguable that Arafat walked away and never laid out a solid deal for Israel to accept up until his death. Arafat never did that. If you disagree with that, you're delusional. You're just wrong. But why he walked away, well, technically you could have two people that are on very different sides that have a huge disagreement on that. Like, was Camp David a real offer? Should he have even entertained it? Were there threats that he was facing at home? I think it was Hafez or.
But those are facts too. But yeah, those are facts too.
Well,
right?
They're facts, but like how you weight them is important, I think. Because people really want to assign blame to one side or the other.
So let's talk about the specific examples. You
Sure.
said. You said Arafat? Is that the name?
Sure, we can say like the Camp David to the parameters to the top of something.
You're saying it is indisputable that Arafat. Don't let me. I know you said it 2 seconds ago, but I
generally Palestinians walked away without giving solid like deals. Like, we want this, and then we'll have peace.
In the Camp David, which happened in
2000.
2000. Okay, so your claim is in 2000. There was Camp David. The Palestinians unequivocally walked away from it. Indisputable. Ilan Pappe would agree with that.
You should,
so on and so forth. And then where the disagreement is the nuance of, well, the Palestinians think it was never a good offer to begin with, or this other pressures. And my point is that those details are also facts. So why can't we agree to those facts too?
Well, because the interpretations are, it's one step further. It's who's to blame, right? So let's say that let's say that they walk away from Camp David, right? Well, somebody might think like, well, they should have accepted Camp David, right? They why would they walk away from that? That's not good. And then so I might argue Arafat was greedy, the Palestinians were greedy. They should have accepted Camp David. It was stupid of them not to. And now look at where we're at. And Ilan Pappe might go, okay, well, hold on. When Israel came into Camp David, they were offering 62% of the land or something, and by the end of that, they were past 90%. And at Taba Summit, they were going to offer even more. Who are you to say that Arafat should have accepted that deal when just months later they got such a better deal? Why would you say that they should have, right? So here's where we can argue back and forth, and it's like, well, I don't think it's worth the risk of not having peace. And look, they didn't even accept it at Taba Summit; it was offered later. And then he might say, well, who's to say that what was offered at Taba wouldn't have been offered later on an even better deal past that? Who knew that the second intifada was going to start, right? So this is where I think there's room for reasonable minds can disagree on what somebody should have done or where like the moral culpability is. But when you start with like Israel never was going to follow through on a deal, they would have just lied about everything. It's like, okay, well, what do you
I'm only interested in looking at views by good faith, smart, well-read people on this issue. Like, and you being one of them. I mean, because I part of the problem with the conflict is you have pro-Israel people who point to the most extreme of the pro-Palestine side, and they say, look, they all support Hamas, they want us to be killed. And you have pro-Palestine people who point to the most extreme on the Israel side, who say, hey, they just want to take over all of our land. And you have both extremes on both sides, and they're both wrong. And I think the only way to make sense of any of this is to look at people who, like my personal view is that, you can be pro-Israel, be pro-Palestine. There's, like you said, there's arguments on both sides, but just be empathetic to civilians. Like, I think people should be able to condemn Hamas and be able to feel terrible for the civilians dying in Gaza. And if you're able to hold those two thoughts in your head at once, then be pro whatever you want. Is kind of how I feel. Do you agree with that?
No, I don't think so. I think that
why not?
Because empathy means nothing if it doesn't come with an action, right? Like, you can feel empathetic towards it. Would be like saying, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do the thing. It'd be like saying, like, okay, well, you can understand that the Nazis might be in the wrong, but Germany legitimately had a lot of grievances after World War I. And sure, we should agree that, like, a lot of things that Hitler were doing were bad, but like, yeah, the Holocaust and the concentration camps were bad, but we should still be able to have empathy for like everybody involved. And that's it. That's not enough for most people. People delude themselves into thinking that people are looking for peace. People want peace in Ukraine and Russia. People want peace in Gaza and Israel. Peace in both situations is so easy to obtain. If Ukraine would just stop fighting, they would have peace. Just give Russia what they want and just be done with it. If the Palestinians wanted peace, they'd all move into the Sinai and boom, they'd have peace. People don't want peace. People want justice. People want what they feel is owed to them. What is right? Yeah.
My point about empathy, this is what I meant to say.
Sure.
And tell me if you agree or not. You probably have friends who are pro-Palestine, right? Maybe?
At this point, I'm not sure. I think I do. Yeah, I do.
Don't you have a lot of liberal?
Yeah, no, I do. Yeah. Sure.
Friends, probably. And my guess is that the reason you're able to be friends with them is because your pro-Palestinian friends are not the ones who are cheering on Hamas. They're the ones who are condemning Hamas and have empathy for the Israeli civilians who've been killed. And so therefore you can respect their view, just like you could respect a Republican's view. I'm just saying, like, I feel like the bare minimum for respecting someone's view is if they empathize with the suffering that your side is enduring.
Sure, you can have that, but like
Destiny could have a friend who's pro-Trump, as long as he understands the grievances that women deal with who can't get abortion, and he has some other explanation, right?
I mean, I guess it just doesn't mean I don't care much about the empathy. Like, let's say you've got a guy who's like, he's really empathetic towards like the pain that Black people experienced during slavery, but he's like still pro-slavery. It's like, okay, well, your empathy doesn't mean much to me. If you have a pro-Palestinian guy who is very adamantly Palestinian, who might have lost several, family members in Gaza, and you're like, listen, like, Israel should continue to, prosecute this war the way they have been. I think it's okay for them to do it, but I feel bad for your loss. Like, that guy doesn't care that you feel bad for his loss. Do you feel, sorry to ask this, do you feel bad for the Gazan civilians who've died in Gaza? Yeah, I mean, I feel bad for civilians that are caught up in war. That's always a shitty thing.
There you go.
But they don't. Yeah. But why? But who cares? If it reminds me of like when I'd work in it reminds me when I worked in fast food, and sometimes like during big rushes, like management or people would come in and they'd like thank you so hard for your work. It's like, I don't care, pay me more. I don't care if you're thanking me. Why do I charge you?
Who cares is everything, because we can have different views, but the only way that we can respect each other is if we have empathy. I mean, not to get sappy, but like let me put it this way: the pro-Israelis who you've debated against, like the IDF guy, your beef with him fundamentally is that he doesn't give a shit about Palestinians, right? That's your beef with him. You're like, dude,
I don't think so. I think my beef is probably who was this? Which person?
The guy, what is it?
Simcha Rahman or whatever?
Yeah.
No, I don't care if he cares about Palestinians or not. He can hate Palestinians for all I care. My issue with him is he has really bad policy positions, and he is leading Israel into destruction, off a cliff. I don't care if he hates or likes Palestinians. His policy positions are really bad, and the direction that he's driving the car is really bad.
Wouldn't you have a problem with a pro-Israel person who says, yeah, I don't care about people who are dying in Gaza. It's their fault. They support Hamas. War is war. Like, wouldn't that be problematic to say, like, to think that way?
It could be. It could downstream have problems. But if you're a Palestinian, you live in Gaza, and you have the compassionate right-wing Israeli who feels really bad about what's happening in Palestine, but will always support the administration, versus an incredibly like orthodox, like hardline fucking Jew who's like, listen, we need to just get out of all the territories. Right? This is what Sharon wanted to do, but he had a fucking stroke. Right? We're going to leave the West Bank, and we're going to pull out of the Gaza Strip. We're leaving everything. Right? You probably want the guy who hates the Arabs more, who wants to just leave, than the guy who's like, I have a lot of compassion.
That's not how it works. Our thoughts drive our actions. Right? Like a normal, rational person.
No, I agree with what you're saying. Generally, our thoughts drive our actions, but there's a policy disconnect sometimes that's very frustrating. And I'm sure here I'm empathizing with Palestinians. I'm sure Palestinians are really tired of hearing from compassionate people that support the war about how sad they feel about the suffering. I'm probably like, listen, if you feel bad about this, then change your policy position. I don't need your sympathy. I need your votes for a different administration, would be my guess. But
yeah. I think that the right-wing actions being taken by Israel to take over areas in the West Bank, and I think you agree with this. I think the mentality that drives the IDF or Israel to continue taking settlements in the West Bank, or being kind of not like being willing to continue the war in Gaza, what's driving that is a lack of empathy for Palestinians. I think if they had more empathy for Palestinians, they'd be less likely to do those things. Because how we feel about people drives what we do, right?
Maybe. I don't think so, though. No, I don't think so. No, I don't think so.
Do you think that the fact that a lot of Israeli leaders have said comments like just dehumanizing the Palestinians, you don't think that's related to their actions?
I think it plays a part. I don't know if it would be the major thing, and I don't know if it would be the thing I would try to change them. Maybe I would, because it's like the easiest thing to change is how people feel about it.
It has to be. If you get leaders of, Yoav Gallant said, "We are fighting." This is quote: "We are fighting human animals. We must act accordingly." Later, Naftali Bennett said, "We are fighting Nazis." Netanyahu said, "Remember when Amalek has done to you." Blah blah blah. They call them human animals. Like that rhetoric, you see that rhetoric, and you see what's going on, and you say, I wonder if there's a connection. They're calling them human animals, and then they're treating them like human animals. Maybe they're acting based on how they feel towards them.
I mean, like I'm sure there's a connection. I think at this point in my career, I'm so tired of hearing about people talk about like empathy, but then the policy positions don't match it at all. It just doesn't seem to like matter much. Like having empathy is like a good first step, but people act like it's everything. Like there has to be way more policy wonky discussion going on. We have to have way more strong positions. It's not enough to just have empty empathy where we just say like, man, I feel bad for these people as we continue to push the buttons to drop more bombs on them. Like,
action is all that matters, right? My point is that action is driven by what's in here, like you're feeling, like what you want to do, by intention. Call it whatever you want, intention, empathy, use whatever noun. But the point is that if there's not a respect, if they don't see the other side as being human, they're not going to treat them as human.
Sure.
Right?
You just got to be careful how hard you yank that empathy chain, because emotions can take you to really scary places, right? Like the
I don't think it's
emotions
scary
that
to say have empathy. Just view Palestinians as humans. That's a good start.
sure, it can be, but like, remember, empathy is what leads countries to do insane things in the first place, right? Fear responses are conditioned a lot sometimes off of the empathy that we have for our fellow human beings. The empathy that we felt for people jumping out of towers on 9/11 is what got us into war in the Middle East with Iraq and Afghanistan. And the empathy that Israel's felt for their fellow countrymen on October 7th and the videos they saw there probably drove a lot of the national sentiment towards the current war in Gaza. I think it's good to view people as people. Like, you should have some level of empathy, but like, this is like step one of like a 100-step process towards like actually effecting some kind of real change, I think. Yeah.
So I think it's pragmatically of utmost importance. And here's an example. The reason why the world, like a huge part of the world, condemns Israel right now is not because of data points. It's because they're like, holy shit, Israel just killed 40,000 fucking Palestinians and they've destroyed 80% of Gaza. That's horrible. And they're not crunching numbers. They're having the world, like France, all these countries are having an emotional reaction to what Israel is doing. And that emotional reaction is in a very real terms, hurting Israel. So therefore, it matters. Like, you might not want it to matter, but it does. Like, how the impact that Israel has in the world hurts Israel's security.
I mean, doesn't matter.
So
let's look at the international. Who do you think there's more empathy for right now? Palestinians getting bombed or the victims of October 7th?
The former, the Palestinians getting bombed,
right? How?
Because there's way more, as there should be. There's way more.
But how is that helping them? How has it helped them?
So one way it's helped them is that now there's a lot of pressure on Israel to have a ceasefire. Maybe if there wasn't the pressure. What?
Where's the ceasefire at?
Maybe if there wasn't the pressure, Israel would have killed 100,000 Palestinians by now.
Maybe they would have, but
actually, I think that's a reasonable claim. I think they're being less aggressive than they would be if it weren't for the world condemning them.
Possibly, maybe it might help a little bit, but it doesn't seem like it's causing like any major shift. Like, Israel is persecuting their war in the way that they wanted to. They're looking for Hamas, and as soon as they're going to continue it until they feel like they've finished their mission, basically, right? And now they're potentially on the eve of war with, I don't know, with Hezbollah or with Iran. I haven't followed stuff recently. I don't know how close they are to moving in that direction, but I don't disagree. I'm fighting a lot on this point. I'm just fighting a lot on this point because I've noticed sometimes that empathy is married with empty rhetoric or policy or lack of policy, and that drives me crazy. You are right. Like, you need some level of empathy. If you view people as animals, it makes it much easier to kill those people and to do horrible things to them. But man, the focus on empathy, like a person persuaded with empathy can be persuaded against, with empathy. And it's just, that's a scary world to live in. People need to think a little bit more critically about what's going on.
A person not using empathy is going to do sick things.
Maybe. I think things can work in weird ways. I think that Israel's disengagement from Gaza, I think, was good when it happened. And when I spoke with Yossi Beilin, he told me that Sharon had told him that the reason why he wanted disengagement, because I asked Beilin, I was like, why unilateral disengagement? It seems like such a bad idea. And Beilin was like, Sharon told me he doesn't trust anything an Arab says. And I was like, wait, what? And he's like, yeah, in 2005, he still said this. Beilin was like, I can't believe that he still, but he's like, yeah, I don't trust anything Arabs say. And Sharon, arguably, wanted to pull out of not just Gaza, but the West Bank as well. These are one of the things that, oh my God, fuck, I just forgot his name. I shouldn't forget this guy's name. Shlomo Ben-Ami told me. He said that the real tragedy was Sharon dying of a stroke. It wasn't actually the assassination of Rabin. It was Sharon dying of a stroke, because if Rabin would have survived and continued living, he would have ran into all the same problems we have today, probably. But if Sharon would have stayed alive, Sharon probably would have actually done full disengagement of the West Bank. There were some settlements that were destroyed, and Sharon didn't trust Arabs at all. So there's just like, I agree with you in the general, but I think too much focus sometimes goes on to like this empathy point, and more needs to be focused on like, what is the actual policy that's going to solve this problem, instead of the kumbayas and the nice tweets. Not that that's all you're suggesting we do, but yeah.
Listen, virtue signaling is bullshit for sure. But don't you agree that a fundamental part of the Israel-Palestine conflict is that Israelis don't respect Palestinians and vice versa? They see they're in this. There's this just this perpetual state of fighting, because it seems like a lot of Israelis don't respect Palestinians, and maybe vice versa.
Yeah, but I think a lot of that comes from the lack of shared history. I think there's a factual origination. If you're a Palestinian and you think that Israelis came here as British, dogs, basically, they were sent here as imperialists to take over your land, and then they nakba'd you once, and then they took over all your shit in 1967, and then all they've done is denied you a government, denied you representation, cooed your government, set up a puppet government, the PA, with these puppet leaders. Like, yeah, well, why the fuck would you expect an Israeli? Like,
how when you started thing?
Maybe, but like when you talk about Palestinian, you say like have some empathy for the Israelis. Like, why the fuck would I have empathy for any of these people? Look at the history.
Because if they understand their history, like you're saying, they need to have a shared sense of history. I think that's kind of what I'm saying, like empathy, understanding the perspective of Israelis. You're saying have a shared understanding of history. I'm saying empathy, another word for that is just to understand their point of view, which I think is the common thread between what we're saying. Like they need to understand the other perspective.
Okay.
Do you think that you can be pro-Israel, switching topics slightly, do you think you can be what does it mean to be pro-Israel? People like make this binary distinction between you're pro-Israel or pro-Palestine. Can't you be like, you have criticisms of Israel? I know that because you've debated pro-Israelis, like the IDF guy. So can you be pro-Israel and condemn the West Bank settlements or the blockade, just like you can be pro-America and be against the Iraq war, for example? Like, where do you you're pro-Israel. Do you condemn things that Israel's done, or what does that mean to you to be pro-Israel?
In my mind, and I really do think it all boils back to this, or boils down to this, regardless of what people know intuitively or not, and regardless of what people say. I think that being pro-Israel is kind of like being a Zionist. You're saying that I think that there ought to exist a country that is a state for Jewish people. I think that's what it means to be pro-Israel. And I would say that being anti-Israel is somebody that wants to fight on the concept of a Jewish nation, or a nation that can have a Jewish character enshrined in law. I think that's what it generally means to be pro or anti-Israel. And then people can nibble around the edges there, but I think that's really what we're getting at.
So you can still be critical of Israel and be pro-Israel.
I think that you absolutely must be, because if you're cheering on the West Bank settlements, you are cheering on the destruction of your country, I think. But,
So that's a good segue. What are the strongest criticisms against Israel? Or how would you steelman the pro-Palestinian argument?
The steelman for the pro-Palestinian argument is the fact that Israel wants to live in both worlds. Israel wants to say, this is not an apartheid state, but we also have like a bunch of people living here, and we have no way of like actually solving, whatever issues are going on. And this isn't your country; it's our territory. And it's like, okay, well, listen, then it's apartheid. If you want to say that it's your country and we're just living here as your subjects, basically, then it's fucking apartheid. If you want to say it's not apartheid, then fine, it doesn't have to be apartheid. But then it's our country. Fuck you, leave. I think that the dual situation going on in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank needs to stop. That there has to be some agreement or settlement, and Israel needs to aggressively work towards that solution. If Abu Mazen isn't the guy to work with on that, figure it out. You have to figure this out. I don't care what you have to do. You have to figure it out. That's probably the biggest thing that needs to change.
Sorry, so you're saying that to steelman the pro-Palestinian argument, you're saying that Israel is trying to have it both ways, to say that they're not an apartheid state, but also to they do treat Palestinians differently, and they're saying it's not an apartheid state. So one of those things has to be.
Yeah,
is that what you're saying?
I would say, yeah. You can't have an indefinitely occupied territory. That's just a country with another name, or a part of your country with another name. You can't have it. It can't be indefinitely occupied. That's crazy. It's been like 60 years or something. Like, geez.
So is that and how would you respond to that how do you, without steelmanning the Palestinian argument, like how do you actually feel about that? What you just said.
Well, the Israeli argument is we've tried to. We've tried to negotiate with your leaders. Arafat wasn't interested. Every time, look at what that got us. That got us the second Intifada. Every time we try to negotiate with any sort of Palestinian leadership, it seems like there's either an Intifada, or if we pull out of an area, we just get more violence. We disengage from Lebanon after 2006, and it was after the end of the first Lebanon war. After Israel disengaged from that, you got the, I think in the 80s, right? They got Hezbollah when they disengaged from the Gaza Strip. They got you got Hamas. What is the incentive that Israel has? Even in some of the Palestinian Authority, territories, some of the biggest bomb makers were, supposed to have been coming out of places like Ramallah and stuff during the Second Intifada. So Israel's like, well, when we leave places, we just get violence, and it doesn't seem like you guys are giving us any leaders that we can actually negotiate with, because every time we try to negotiate a peace plan, you guys never give us any solids, and things just get indefinitely, stalled until nothing happens. Yeah.
And could you steelman the broad? I mean, I feel like the more fundamental aspect of the pro-Palestinian argument is that the founding of Israel was unjust, right? That it necessarily expelled Palestinians. That was baked into Zionism. Mm-hmm. Actually, let me ask about that. So your debate on Lex with Finkelstein, one of the points he hung on was Benny Morris's book spent a while talking about that idea that expulsion was intrinsic to Zionism, and Benny Morris's response was like, "Hey, no, but it's a small part. It's not intrinsic; it's just a small part of it." I don't think
that was Morris's response. The response was, expulsion only became necessary once it was demonstrated that Arabs and Jews wouldn't be able to live peacefully, largely because the Arabs were violently resisting the mass transfer or the mass migration of Jewish people to the Levant. I think that was to the mandatory Palestine area. Once that started to become clear, after the terrorist attacks from Arabs to Jews, after all the violence of the 20s through the 30s, then it was like, yeah, okay, this isn't going to work anymore.
I misheard it. I thought Benny Morris did concede that, yes, there is elements, not that it's like the point of Zionism is for the Jewish people to find a homeland. Mm-hmm. Like I'm with you on that. But Finkelstein's point that I thought Benny Morris conceded on was that they didn't agree on the significance of it, but I thought they both agreed that intrinsic to Zionism in some component was this idea of expulsion. Like it was maybe it was just in a diary or whatever, but there was not there.
You have to be careful which part you're talking about. To some extent, you're right. There's a name for this concept. It might just be called Jewish labor, but I think there's a more specific name for it. But when Jews buy land, they want to work that land with other Jewish people. That was like part of their, I think it might be called conquest for labor, Jewish conquest for labor, maybe. But in part of buying land in the Palestinian area, in the Levant, even under the Ottoman Empire, when Jews bought the land, they wanted to pay off the Arab farmers that worked there so that they would leave, and they didn't always want to leave, but they paid them the minimum payment and then they kicked them off. So that is true, but people will sometimes conflate that with statements made by either Kaisman or Ben-Gurion about how transfer had become necessary or expulsion had become necessary. But this was after all the civil warring from Arabs to Jews had been going on. And then people will conflate that with whether or not Jews wanted to expel all the Arabs, like in the Nakba, that was that Plan Dalet, Plan D, that was planned from the very beginning. And this just happened out of nowhere, or not out of nowhere, but it was like a pre-planned ethnic cleansing. It had nothing to do with the war that was going on. So these three ideas get kind of like thrown around interchangeably. Yeah.
So I think what you're saying is like, yeah, there was this notion of like expulsion, but in the least malicious way possible.
There was expulsion, but in the
hold on. Notion mm-hmm. Was the according to Finkelstein, Benny Morris wrote 25 pages about the idea that expulsion was there. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I think what you're saying is, yeah, it was there, but it was not that malicious, or they're really talking about buying land.
They're talking about, yes. In the beginning, they're talking about buying land and having only Jews work the land.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, that's a lose-lose if you're Jewish, because let's say, for instance, Jews bought the land and had the Arabs work it. Well, people would just say that the Jews were like capitalist enslavers of Arabs anyway. So, I mean, it's not like they could have won on that. But yeah, that initial part is. But the idea of buying all of Israel and evicting all the Arabs was built into Zionism from the start. That's not true.
Got it. So before I said, hey, Steelman, the pro-Palestinian argument, and I wanted you to kind of debate yourself on that. But rather than asking that again, I think what I'm curious is, can you tell me, not to Steelman anything, but tell me in sincerity, what are your biggest criticisms of Israel?
The West Bank settlements are horrible. That has to stop. It's just stupid. You're destroying your country by continuing to expand while inevitably putting off peace with Palestinians while still playing to this Menachem Begin's idea of capsule theory, this idea that, well, we can just make peace with all the other people like they did with Egypt and Jordan, and we can do it with the Abraham Accords. We just ignore the Palestinians. It's so stupid. You have to stop ignoring the Palestinians. I can't believe they signed those Abraham Accords and moved the embassy and thought that they could just keep living life like these millions of people that are within your occupied borders aren't going to rise up against you. It's so stupid. That's so stupid and arrogant.
Yeah. So that would be, so, you know, you call yourself pro-Israel, but I think there's a terminology problem that we experience, right? Tell me if you agree or not. But I feel like a lot of pro-Israel people probably, maybe they wouldn't concede as much, and likewise, you have people who are let me say this: you have people who are pro-Palestine who don't want to condemn Hamas because they feel like condemning Hamas is hurting their cause, is in some way deflecting the blame from the IDF to Hamas when they're really pissed off at Israel. And likewise, you have pro-Israeli people who won't condemn the West Bank settlements for the same reason. They feel like conceding on that point weakens their point. And I think it's the opposite. You know, the more we concede, the stronger our argument. The more we can concede on points that are not essential to our argument, the stronger the argument becomes. Someone you and I both know said this to me recently, that if someone's trying to sell you a used car, and they say to you, listen, you should buy this car, but I gotta tell you, like the AC is busted, the window needs to be repaired, but the rest of it's great. Like, you're more likely to buy the car because you see that you trusted that person's being sincere because they're admitting all the problems in that case with the car. I think it's so important for people to be like you just did, for people to be able to concede and not just say, no, Israel's in the right all the time. And, you know, the West Bank settlements are necessary because the land belongs to the Jews, because of the Bible, or because the war, whatever. Just a random thought I had. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I kind of agree. Yeah, I'm just because of where I'm at in the West and my position online. Like, I'm like the pro-Israel guy, but the reality is if you stick me in front of a Zionist, I'm going to come off as like a bleeding heart pro-Palestinian. Like I said, like, I'm grossly opposed to the settlements. I think that Israel needs to do a much better job at taking care of its Arab population. It's actually like phenomenal. The Palestinians that live in Israel, I didn't even realize until I was there. I was like, Jesus, you have 2 million. These are like the most primed to be fucking terrorist Muslims in the entire fucking planet. And they are amazing people. They don't do it. There was no third intifada on October 7th. Why don't you brag about these people more? But instead, Israel is locked down. You know, they cut off all the work permits from the West Bank. They stopped buying services and stuff from Arab Palestinians that live in Israel. Like, Jesus, like, the fuck is wrong with you? Yeah, they're just like that. Those are huge mistakes, I think. When I did a show with is it Ilan Levy? Is that a real person? That's the name, right?
There's Gideon Levy, who I spoke to.
Okay, Jewish people have like 4 last names. Okay, so that might be his name. Hold on. Yeah, it is. Or it might be Ilan. I'm sorry, Ilan Levy. I spoke to Ilan, and I think when I went on his show, I think he thought, because when we were speaking in the car, I was very critical of the Palestinian narrative side of things, because I am. I think there's a lot of really dumb stuff over there. But when I went on it,
Levy is one last name. Just saying.
Yeah. What about it?
You said you have 4 last names.
Oh no, I meant there's like 4 or 5 different like last names, like total. Like, it feels like,
you're saying right. Yeah. Levy's the big one. Cohen. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And then first names too. Yeah, lots of Ariels, lots of Shlomos, lots of yeah. But I think when he brought me on his podcast, on his Israeli podcast, he was the guy that was the old spokesman for the Israeli something. He was the eyebrow guy on TV. But anyway, when he brought me on, I think he was expecting me to just be like full, like, yeah, let's go Israel. But he started to hammer home a lot of those big pro-Zionist, like very far right points. And I'm like, hold on, we're going to argue about all of this. I don't agree with any of this. And I think I came off as like very pro-Palestinian on that podcast. There were a lot of like very Zionist people that were very upset at me being there. And I don't think that he was thinking that was going to happen at the start. Yeah.
I think that nuance is so essential. And I think it's a problem with how people reason. Tell me what if you agree. And this also pertains to Trump and politics. It's like whatever side you take, people often have a hard time being either seeing the flaws with that point of view or being willing to express them.
Yeah, I think it happens sometimes. Right? Yeah, because your side is fully good and the other side is fully bad. So admitting faults is really hard or impossible.
And then it makes you seem insincere. So, for example, the pro-Israel people who do not concede on the West Bank settlement, and they don't think there's a problem with that, if someone heard them speak, they'd say, "Wow, pro-Israel people are terrible. Mm-hmm. They don't care about Palestinians. They think the West Bank settlements are a good thing. Mm-hmm. It must be evil to have the pro-Israeli view." So I think it's the distinction so essential. What else? What other criticisms do you have with Israel? You said taking care of the Arab population, the West Bank settlements. How about the blockade?
I think the blockade is understandable, but the blockade has to go now after this war. Because remember, the reason for the blockade was to prevent bad things from getting into an area that was controlled by Hamas. But if you're going to stay here and you're going to, execute this war up to the destruction of all of Hamas, even if that means you've got to blow up, half the Gaza Strip to do it, fine, have your war. I think it was just to start the war. And I even think the way in which they've carried it out is generally okay, although with some criticisms. But
didn't they destroy 80% of Gaza?
No, those numbers are not.
What do you think is the percentage they destroyed?
Just and any way that you talk about it, it depends on how you measure things. 80% is the number you get of like homes that are damaged or destroyed if you include like a single broken window. Some people will go to the other extreme and say it's like 27% if you look at like uninhabitable homes now. There's different ways to measure it, but all I'm saying is that like 50, if you're gonna I don't 50%. Know, it's a small area. You can rebuild quick. I'm just saying that if you're gonna do this much damage and you're gonna carry this war out so hardcore, then the blockade has to go away afterwards. You can't justify having the blockade after doing this work because the whole point was to get rid of Hamas and the blockade was there for Hamas, right? So
two different. We're talking about blockade and also destruction in Gaza, but so 27 being the low end, 80 being the high end. What do you think is like realistically the number of places in Gaza that have been destroyed? Like unlivable.
I can't even guess. I have no idea.
So between 27 and 80, let's call it 50%. Let's take the low end and say a third, 33%. I mean that's like pretty devastating, right? That's pretty bad.
Yeah, it's a lot
like
of damage.
33%. Yeah. I mean, so the blockade, the stated intention from Israel is to prevent Hamas or other militant groups from getting weapons. Mm-hmm. But as we know, the way a blockade works is it's going to slow down the influx of food and other stuff that people need. So you said you think it's been justified. Let me, I guess, poke that a bit. It wasn't successful in preventing weapons from getting in, right? So it did not succeed in its aim. And you would also agree, as the UN has stated, that the blockade has something like halved, split and cut in half Gaza's economy over the last almost 20 years since it started in 2007. Mm-hmm. So given the civilian suffering that you and I acknowledge it has caused, and the fact that I think you and I would also both agree that it did not succeed at blocking weapons, why do you think it was a good idea?
Well, I mean, I'll borrow your argument from earlier, right? Sure. What did you say? Something along the lines of like the compassion for the Palestinians has been good because maybe they would have killed even more people. While Israel would say, well, they've gotten weapons in and that's bad, but without the blockade, they would have gotten in even more weapons, right?
Mm-hmm. But what about the civilian toll? Like there was a UN report that shows, and I think this is accurate, that Gaza's economy would have been about double if it weren't for the blockade. And that obviously that's going to cause like a lot of suffering. So it's a hard equation to run, but is a country allowed to impose any amount of security policy on another country for security? Let's take it at face value that Israel did that for security. Mm-hmm. Are they allowed to do whatever they want in the name of security?
Seems like it. Seems like that's what the rules of the world are right now, right? Russia's invaded Ukraine, and everybody says that was for security. Assad gassed his own people, and people say that was for, yeah.
But those are not the good guys, right? We don't like what they did.
Yeah, well, sure. I mean, but I'm just saying that people tend to function with the rule set that the people around them have adopted and the people that will help them have adopted. That seems to be how people function. And to expect anybody to function any way differently is just probably not going to be the case. There's probably some use Kogan, some rules where like, okay, well, you can't start raping everybody or genociding everybody. That's probably not good. But in terms of, like a blockade, the question is like, what would Hamas do given unrestricted access to being able to ship in weapons, some people say they would do nothing and they'd live in peace and harmony. I think that's probably delusional. Like Hamas hasn't done any of the current investment. All the stuff that's going in right now hasn't been used for, noble purposes. Like how many miles of tunnels they built? Where are the civilian tunnels,
Yeah. but I mean, you saying, hey, look at Bashar al-Assad and look at Putin, like, come on, that's not a good argument to say, look, why can't Israel have the blockade? Look at Putin did, look at Bashar al-Assad. That's not fair. We don't want to look at those guys and try to copy them, right?
No, we don't. And we have the privilege of that from across the Atlantic. But if your neighbors are all of these people, and these are people that you feel want to destroy you, and in the past they tried multiple times and failed, then yeah, you wouldn't trust them, any further than you could blockade their cookies coming in, I guess.
But okay, and then so let's go.
Let me be like super clear on this, okay? The blockade, it sucks that damage is coming to civilians, but here's the issue. Here's the issue that you run into if you're Jewish, okay, or if you're Israeli, is you look to the north and you see over 300,000 Syrians are killed by Assad, okay? By chemical warfare, by chemical weapons, okay? These are Geneva Convention banned weapons. These are civilians that are being killed. It's like a trillion different fucking war crimes, okay? Like so much footage and crazy shit has come out, okay? And you're like, okay, well, holy shit, all right? Then you look, okay, to the southeast at the end of the Arabian Peninsula or whatever, and you've got Yemen going on, you've got Gaza. UN's been complaining for 7 months about mass starvation. The number of starvation deaths is like somewhere between 20 and 0, okay? Then you look at Yemen, where I think the UN's children's food program has said anywhere from around 50,000 children have died due to malnutrition or starvation. Okay. Nobody seems to be doing anything about them. Nobody seems to be helping any of those people. You've got Iran over to your east. You've got Hezbollah up there to the north. You've got everything going on to your south in Africa and all that. It's like, okay, well, holy shit, everything's fucked here. And then the rest of the world looks at you and they're like, listen, you need to let go of the blockade and let Hamas do what they want. And if they're really bad to you, we'll come and help. Israel's like, yeah, I'm sure you'll be down here to help us if something goes wrong. So that's the Israeli perspective. Now, is the situation tragic for the people living in Gaza? Absolutely. But damn, if you're Israeli, are you about to give up your only nation that you formed, from fucking Holocaust survivors to say like, fuck it, let's roll the dice on these people over here, and hopefully they won't turn into another Houthi, another Hezbollah, another Hamas,
Let's get into the weeds a little bit on the blockade. You mentioned cookies. Let's go with that. You debated Omar Badar, is that his name?
Yeah.
On, I forget whose show.
Breaking Points.
And Breaking Points. Breaking Points?
With Ryan
Something
Green,
like that.
Yeah.
So you were saying that the reason why the blockade stopped cookies from coming in is because Hamas was known to use sugar and fertilizer and other stuff as part of their fuel for rockets.
I think the argument is that the blockade is only done as a form of collective punishment. And then an example that people like to go to are cookies were blockaded. And my response to that, without having dug super extensively into it, I know that fertilizer and sugar is used to make they were called Kassam rockets, and I think in the 2000s when they made them. They use more sophisticated stuff now. And I know that people in Syria have videos showing them. There was a CNN interview with a guy who was showing you how to mix sugar and fertilizer to make rocket stuff. And he said
You said they're using more sophisticated stuff now?
They've got more sophisticated weaponry now than just these really shitty crude mixes.
So why would they block sugar now?
Well, so that's the thing. I did more digging into this afterwards because now I was curious for the fact of the matter. And I'm like, okay, well, what the fuck was cookies were never on an official blockade list anywhere. And sugar wasn't on a blockade list officially anywhere. I think some goods got blocked from different countries for different reasons. One is because they didn't know who it was coming from, or they didn't trust whatever the supplier. But I don't think there was ever a broad cookie ban. I couldn't find any information to even back that up. So, yeah. But the main point that me and Badar were fighting on, the cookie thing came up, but it was just, his point was just that Israel's just blockading stuff because they're big meanies. And my point was, well, there's probably a reason why they blockade this stuff. For the cookie thing, maybe it had to do with the sugar content. But they didn't even ban sugar. I don't think they even banned cookies.
Well,
so yeah.
Hold on, it didn't have to do with the sugar content because you said that they use new types of rockets.
Well, the blockading stuff that he was talking about was this. I think the cookie accusation was it 2008. That wasn't recent. Where this accusation came from was over a decade ago. I think maybe over 15 years ago. Or because the blockade started, I think it was 2005. I think right, 2005, 2006, after Hamas take over and kicking out of Fatah.
So okay, so maybe both these claims are kind of obsolete. And
wait, hold on. Let me be super clear. People misunderstand this. The debate is not about cookies, and the debate is not about cookie bans. The debate is whether the blockade exists because Israel are big bad mean guys, or whether it exists because of security reasons. Right? That's what both sides claim. And the truth, I think, is probably more on the security side than just they're being big jerks and they just want to make the lives of Palestinians worthless.
But there's a middle ground, though, right? The middle ground would be that Israel has the blockade fundamentally to prevent Hamas, etc., from getting weapons. But the middle ground answer is, and in doing so, Israel oversteps and they take security precautions that go beyond what's pragmatically helpful for their security and result meaningfully more in Palestinian suffering than in Israeli security. I haven't done the analysis, but I'm just saying like that's one of my problems with this the Israel-Palestine thing is all of these like thousands of arguments become binaries. It's like the IDF is either trying, the pro-Israel, they're trying to defend themselves, or no, Israel is this evil state. And it's like, how, Israel is a country. Like, how do you say, like, we don't say America is good or bad. It's a fucking country, and America does bad shit and they do good shit. You can't call a person good or bad. You can't call a country so what do you think about that?
No, I agree. Like, if the argument was the blockade exists for security reasons, but I bet there are times when Israel maybe leans a little bit too hard into it as some kind of form of retribution or whatever, that might be true. That there might be an argument to be had there, but that's like you said, it's very, very, very binary.
Well, so let's strip away the binary part and let's agree that, look, if Israel was blocking cookies, and this was past 2000 whatever, once they stopped using the Casma rockets. What's it called? Casma rockets. Then we could say, gee, or like potato, like, why are they blocking this stuff? Like,
again, I don't even know if they did, but then if they did, and this is why it's so important to get more than just news from headlines or even news from a short article.
So I'm looking at I don't know if this is a reliable source, the partial list of items prohibited into Gaza Strip. This is from 2010. So you have like sage, cardamom, cumin, all these spices, and then you have chocolate, nutmeg.
Yeah, that list is not. That's not. I don't think that's real. Where are you reading that from? Don't say The Intercept. Or the Middle East Observer, I think, is the other meaning.
NormanFinkelstein.com. Just kidding. It's a Geisha Legal Center for Freedom of Movement.
You could send it to me and I could go over it. I've seen some lists before, but the reality is there wasn't an official list. I don't think ever. Like, that was just never the case. So some people try to guess.
So, but what about potato? And by the way, the cookie thing, so I think what you're saying is like that's not a good point to argue one way or the other, right? It's not worthwhile. The cookie argument is not a worthwhile point to argue, right?
The point is that if you want to say there are retributive blockades or whatever, like, find the item being blockaded, and then we'll ask, like, well, why the fuck is Israel blockading it? What's the reason?
How about potato chips? How about potato chips?
Did they even blockade those?
Didn't you say they did?
I don't think I did. I don't think I've ever brought up. I think potato chips are another one that gets brought up, but I don't think they ever blockaded those. And if they did, this is like my number one. This is my easiest way to figure out if somebody is like being bad faith in conversation or not, because I can do this for both sides of every single thing for this conflict, is when somebody brings up, well, what about this thing? You ask them, well, why do you think they did that thing? What did they say? And if they don't even know what the other side's reason is for it, well, it's like, okay, well, fuck you. You haven't even looked at what they've said. Why am I going to tell? I'm not going to give you the answer. I don't think potato chips are ever officially banned. But if they were, I'd be curious. What does Israel have to say about it? Maybe their excuse is bullshit. Maybe they haven't said anything about it because it's not true. Or maybe, I'd go and look for it.
But sorry, I don't mean to dwell on this point. I'm going to move on from it in a second. I want to make sure I understand you. The idea that Israel blocked cookies, what's our conclusion there? We're saying that they never did.
The point was whether they did it retributively or not. And my point would be, my guess would be that if they were blocking things like cookies, it's probably because they worried that the contents or the destination or the where these things were coming from contained things that were being used to build up. That'd be my guess, right? Now, maybe it was retributive, but show me this. Show me like a state. And you don't have to show me like them saying like, we're doing this because fuck Palestinians, okay? But maybe you can show me them making a statement where like, we weren't really sure what hurt them, so fuck it, we banned all these products. Or maybe they were saying something like, we actually feel like they're using these cookies to build rockets, but then like the department of whatever put out a statement like, actually, there's no evidence of this. Like, we don't even know if they're using these to build rockets. Like, that's just a bullshit statement, right? There are ways you could dispute it, but like, you have to show something,
You're right. Well, I would say, so yeah, I'm going to drop it because I when I heard that, I was like, oh, damn. If they're currently if they're currently right now blocking cookies, and we know that Hamas is not using sugar as rocket fuel, then we could say, okay, maybe Israel's doing something they don't need to be doing, and that thing is hurting Palestinians unnecessarily.
Sure, yeah, potentially, yeah.
But we don't know that. So in your, you wrote up this long document. I don't know if it was before or after your Finkelstein debate. Was it before or after? Was it? A long Israel document, and it referenced the block.
Oh, it's probably the notes that I used going into my Finkelstein debate. I did a lot of prep for that.
And there was a very short piece in the Blockade, and you linked to this article by Coleman Hughes in his Substack. And the article, and the Coleman Hughes says, hey, I read Finkelstein's book. It says that Gazans are suffering. And then Coleman Hughes says, but I looked into the data, and the mortality rate and the infant mortality rate and the life expectancy are all average. So therefore, Finkelstein is wrong. People are not suffering. And I read that and I'm like, oh, come on, that's such a shitty argument. Like you and I know that the suffering of a people, whether it's in Yemen, Gaza, whatever, can't be fully summarized by 3 data points, right?
Well, which data points do you want to use?
I don't know, but more than that, I'm just saying, like,
that question, it's a response to a shitty argument that Finkelstein gave, because it is a bad argument that Finkelstein gives. If your argument that the Palestinians are a ruined people because of the poverty that Israel forces them to live in, that's just not true. The Palestinians are some of the most educated Arabs in the world. They've been known for that ever since UNRWA started after the first Nakba. Like, they've been known as some of the most educated. They're even in Israel proper, they're known as being a highly educated people.
Do you think it sucks to be in Gaza from the last 20 years?
Yeah, of course.
Of course, right. But
why? But why? Why? The why is important.
I'm not even talking about why. I'm just saying, if I say it's being Gaza the last 20 years sucks, and then you and Coleman Hughes say, no, you're wrong, the mortality rate is good. Mm-hmm. I'm like, come on, that doesn't mean it doesn't suck.
But why does it suck?
Well, I'm saying the reason, like the cause, we can debate that, but what I'm saying is,
well, hold on, because Finkelstein says it sucks because they're poor, because all their water is destroyed, because their healthcare is destroyed, because they have. That's why he says. I think so. Coleman Hughes is responding to Finkelstein's. What?
The unemployment rate was crazy high. Has been crazy high.
Sure, and that's a thing you could point to. But the argument that Gazans or Palestinians are suffering, like economically or health wise, that's just not a good argument. It's not true, and that doesn't exist in the data. If you don't even know what the problem is, how can you begin to solve the problem or point towards a solution? I'm not saying that my point in refuting Finkelstein's argument there isn't to say, man, if you're a Palestinian, life is awesome. You love being a Palestinian and living in subjugation for your whole life. It just shows, in my opinion, a lack of understanding of the problem, which means you're not going to understand how to fix the problem, I would say.
Okay. So, but sorry, I'm being redundant.
Okay.
Can it be true that being in Gaza, I'm not talking about the causes. Can it be true that being in Gaza the last 20 years sucks, as evidenced by the incredibly high unemployment rate? The fact that, you can point to positives about being there, but fundamentally, like, you wouldn't want to live there.
Nope.
It's not great to be there. It kind of sucks. And so even if they're like, my point is that the point, it's like, I want to get away from these binaries you and I were talking about earlier, where it's like, oh, Finkelstein's saying that, Gaza, they're all dying. He's wrong. They're not dying. It's like, I don't know. I think Finkelstein's point mostly is that Gaza is a miserable place.
Yeah, but he doesn't know why. That's the issue.
But to try to say it's not a miserable place,
I never said it wasn't a miserable place. I just said his arguments were dog shit.
But what's the point of pointing to the mortality rates?
Because his argument is bad. Look. Do you think that Biden has cognitively slowed down?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. What if I tell you Biden has a ton of health issues because it's obvious that he has brain cancer, right? But what if we do we did like 20 MRI scans. He doesn't have brain cancer, and you tell me that, and I go, "What are you trying to say? He's healthy?" No, you're just saying that he doesn't have brain cancer. That's a stupid argument, right? Jewish people and the West have made a huge mistake in assuming that the only thing Arabs need is money and they'll be good to go. Just give them more money and they'll be fine. That's not true. It's humiliating. And there's been a loss of honor in the community, and there's been a subjugation by another country for a long time. Money's not going to fix it. So when people talk about look at they're starving. No, they're not. Their obesity rates and everything are higher than the rest of the Middle East. They don't have any schools or education. That's not true. It's some of the most educated Arabs in the world. They have all the things. No. The issue is they feel humiliated. They're subjugated. When you go and you talk to people in the West Bank, right? You've got issues of there were 138 new checkpoints. You can't even drive the same way to go to another fucking village or to go to work because now there's a random ass checkpoint. There's not even a guy manning it. It's just closed today. Or if you want to drive into Israel, you got to sit and wait an hour and a half checkpoint for what reason? Right? You worked here for every day for the past 2 years, and now you've got to sit. Right? These things are humiliating, and it's a constant reminder of how much lesser you are as a person, of how little autonomy you have. You can't leave this place. It's a horrible feeling. But when somebody from the outside goes, oh, well, look at how sad they are because they're starving to death. No, they're not. What? They're not. That's not the issue. That's not the issue at all.
Right. So I think, your view, which I think is the rational view, is like to say both things, which is, yes, they are suffering. However, it's not to the extent that Norman Finkelstein is claiming they are.
I wouldn't even want to say to the extent, because it's not even like one is better or worse. It's just a different type of issue, right?
But So my problem with Coleman's article, maybe I misread it.
Mhm.
Maybe I misread it, but my read of it, I thought he was basically dismissing the claim that life in Gaza sucks, because I thought he was saying, listen, life in Gaza doesn't suck.
Coleman, he might think that. I won't speak for him. When I've watched him talk, I think he's generally reasonable, but I don't know if I've heard him talk about that in particular. But he might think that. I don't know. I don't know if I wouldn't agree with his conclusion in that case.
Okay.
I'm just borrowing the stats and the research here, and then I verify.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So I shouldn't over-index on that.
You're good.
Why don't you debate Hasan, man? He's a streamer. He's a pro-Palestine. Wouldn't that be good content? Do you guys hate each other?
Hasan will never. If I'm not debating somebody, it's because that person doesn't want to talk to me. Nobody big in this sphere wants to talk to me. Yeah, of course.
Why doesn't he want to talk to you?
Because they're idiots.
Well, and they don't want to talk to you. Why doesn't he?
He's an idiot because he doesn't know anything about the conflict or anything that's going on. So why would he have a conversation with me and then get exposed for not knowing anything he's talking about? Yeah, it's horrible. It's humiliating.
What is the reason he says why he doesn't want to talk to you?
Because I'm a bad faith, uneducated idiot that just reads Wikipedia and doesn't know what he's talking about and is pro-Israeli Zionist, like eats children. I don't know. Basically that stuff.
Yeah. Well, you do beat children, so that part is.
Some children are really annoying.
Yeah. So, oh my God. Yeah. So he, what is his stated reason for not wanting to?
Oh yeah, that I'm a debate lord, that I'm in bad faith, I'm paid off by the U.S. State Department, that I hate Arabs or something, some dumb shit. Yeah.
What do you make of the idea that the UN, the WHO, Save the Children, Haartetz all say that Israel is, not allowing enough humanitarian aid, is an apartheid state, that there's no safe place for Gazans to go? Do you agree with those organizations, or do you disagree?
We could dive deep on this, but I don't trust any international organization when it comes to analyzing Israel. I don't take any of them at their word. I have to read the underlying reports. Some of the underlying stuff represent good criticisms. Some of the underlying stuff is really bad. It really just depends on who's involved in publishing that particular report, and it depends on where it's coming from and what I have to read the underlying material now when it comes to Israel. I just don't trust anything anymore.
Yeah. So, but do you generally? Do you trust those organizations generally?
Not when it comes to Israel, I don't know. I've seen too much stuff that's just mind-blowingly horribly done, and I'm like, okay, this is ridiculous. Yeah.
But what does that mean then? Oh, this is what I was gonna fucking say, man. I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm like having dementia.
You're good.
I was talking to Straighteraid about your debate with Finkelstein.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I wanted to fucking say. I don't know why my brain's going too many places at once. Okay. Okay. Because we're talking about Hasan, I'm thinking about Finkelstein. Finkelstein kept coming at you. Yeah, this is okay. He kept coming at you saying that, not just coming at you, really coming at you, saying oh, you idiot, you only know Wikipedia. That is a known fallacy. What he's doing, right?
Yeah, of course,
it's an argument. It's a what is it called? The authority. What's it called? No. There's a fallacy. It's called the.
You can say it's an argument from authority or an appeal to authority fallacy, but
so and I want to ask you about that. I just pure curiosity. Why didn't you say to him something like, Finkelstein, dude, you can get up and walk out the door, but as of right now, you're sitting with me at this table. My knowledge is Wikipedia. Deal with my arguments. Deal with the words that I'm saying and respond to them. If I only know Wikipedia, it should make it so easy for you, Mr. Finkelstein, to crush my arguments. I
said other things. I don't think he was ever going to respond to anything I said. I told him, I didn't have every single source, and you can go through. I published my notes on this. Whatever you're referring to is my published notes. I was sourcing everything that I think that he would agree that most of these are reputable sources. A lot of it was NGOs. A lot of it came from that ICJ document, from the South Africa genocide case. It came from just stuff that he would trust. So
but my point is that even if it's not, even if it's it came to you in a dream, you had a dream that Jesus came to you and said these things, you should be debated based on the words coming out of your mouth, not on the sources that those words
I understand,
come from.
but that nothing I could have said would. He went on to Brianna Joy Gray's show afterwards and was giggling with her and said that his whole point was to go on and just be a lunatic. That was his whole point. That Muin Rabbani and him were talking about it, and Rabbani had to hold him back a couple times, and he was like, "Why are you even talking to this guy?
Why is his voice so high? What is going on?"
Damn, I don't know. That's just the way he talks. That's how God made him.
Really? It seems like okay. So you didn't want to anyway, I was frustrated for you when I saw that. I was like, that is such an argument from authority, argument from authority.
Sure.
Like, so, okay. So I asked you about the UN, WHO, Save the Children, Haartetz. They make these claims critical of Israel. I said, what do you make of those? And I think your general conclusion was you don't really take their word for it. So my question
just let me be really clear about that, because some people are way different. I don't trust like a conclusion sentence or whatever. I have to read the underlying material. Some of the reporting can be really good. Haartetz did a really good long form piece on a lot of the errors of the Zaka volunteers, when the guys that were the first volunteers on the site to bury some of the bodies, and they they exposed at least one volunteer who was probably propagating misinformation about the way the bodies were found initially. That was a good piece of reporting by Haartetz. And then sometimes people do really shitty reports. So they've got like, sometimes the UN fact analysis is good, but the legal conclusions are bad. Sometimes the legal conclusions are bad and the facts are bad. It just depends. Like, you have to read this stuff, in my opinion. So I would never say that like, oh, that's the UN. Not going to even waste my time. I don't trust it. Right. I would say, oh, a UN report said this. Let's read through it and see what it actually said. That's what I would say.
So do you believe that Israel did not allow enough humanitarian aid?
I don't see any evidence of that having ever been presented by anybody compelling.
So I think the UN, WHO, Save the Children, Haartetz have all made claims in that direction.
They have, and I don't believe any of them.
So let's just think about that for a second. So what if I agree with you, then what you and I are saying is that we don't trust collectively these global organizations. Like, we're fucked, right? I mean, how do we...
In regards to the reporting on Israel, I think it is really fucked, and I think it's really bad. I think it also shows why Israel probably doesn't trust the rest of the world when it comes to enforcing deals or figuring out what to do, because it seems like the treatment they get is unhinged.
But you would say that a conservative Republican who says, I don't trust Fauci, I don't trust the CDC, you'd say, you're being an idiot. We have to trust our institutions. Like, these are scientific organizations. Like, the CDC ain't lying to you. And if they are, it's some fluke, right? You believe in our institutions, right?
Yeah. I believe in American ones. That doesn't mean they're perfect. There are times when they do things that I think are really bad. But what I would say is, if you don't believe in something, well, fine, but give me your rationale, right? The difference is that, like, I actually do your own research. When people say do your own research, I do. I'll read it. But other people that do their own research just listen to Joe Rogan. So if you want to tell me you don't trust something, okay, fine, give me a reason. And if you just say, well, I heard this on a podcast, okay, well, fuck you, eat shit. I don't trust anything you say, right? When it comes to the starvation thing, I went through and I collected on another thing. I think I had like 60 different links of Palestinians on the verge of starvation since the war began. There are going to be more deaths of starvation than air raids. There are going to be mass deaths, over 100,000, over and over and over and over and over and over again. And at this point, I believe the official number is 0. How is it that they've been on the verge of starvation for almost a year with nobody dying of starvation? What's happened here? What's going on here? So, something's not adding up. Yeah.
Well, So let's. Well, so I want to. So okay. So to that point on starvation.
Yeah.
Maybe they're wrong. I don't know. But what I do know is the UN said that more bombs have been dropped in Gaza than in Dresden, Hamburg, London combined during World War II. I'll make my point, which is that we know that those cities were carpet bombed. So therefore, I don't know. Do we really know that Gaza is not being carpet bombed if those cities were definitively carpet bombed?
Dresden wasn't Dresden like, was it 40,000 people killed in like 20 hours? Do you know what the total death was? Or was it 60,000?
No.
It's not even close. When people make these comparisons, and Dresden this was a city, like people could have fled in all directions. And like there was an act, like we're not talking like the Gaza Strip where it was, like, so this comparison just doesn't, it doesn't even, if you want to use this comparison, it doesn't work at all. Like, holy shit. Like you would expect so many more people dead in Gaza if that was the case. Sorry, it was up to 25,000 people were killed during this bombing.
So the claim is that, we think about what's the destruction in Gaza? Is it catastrophic? Well, let's look at comparison. So Dresden, catastrophic. Hamburg, catastrophic. London, catastrophic. Gaza, there's more bombs dropped. Now, that's not a full accounting, but it's a data point. I mean,
I think if you're asking if it's catastrophic damage in Gaza, the answer is absolutely yes.
Okay.
Of course.
Right. So that's
sure.
Okay. Yeah. But we're on the same page.
I just don't think it's evidence of indiscriminate bombing. Yeah.
And then I also want to acknowledge, like, just the point that, if we can't trust the UN, the WHO, Save the Children, and Haartetz, like, what the fuck? Look, we each have to be independent researchers to find truth. Like, that's not scalable. That's not sustainable.
Yeah, it's not. It's a big problem, which is why people that work in media and alternative media need to do a better job at being critical of what's going on. And it's bothers the fuck out of me. Look at how many times I haven't followed them recently, but what was it, 4 or 5 months ago, when people were saying the ICJ has ordered Israel to stop bombing. or the ICJ's told Israel they're not allowed to continue the war. That's not true. And if you read the ICJ statement, not only if you read the ICJ judges and what they said in response to the statement, that wasn't true. But this was headlined on like 20 different mainstream media sites. I went through and I looked at all of them, and we looked at them on streams. Like, wait, nobody actually read the actual ICJ declaration. What the fuck? Yeah, it's a big problem. Israel just like is where the mind goes to die. I don't know why. It's nobody can cover this region fairly. Like people are mind fucked on it. I don't know why. It's very frustrating.
Is it anti-Semitism?
For most of it, no, I don't think so. For some of it, it might be, but for most of it, I think it's just some weird Western America bad, some weird shit. I think I don't think most of it's anti-Semitism though.
So back to criticisms of Israel, what do you make of all the times they have killed civilians? They claim they're targeting Hamas. Would you agree? By the way, the idea of like, hey, Hamas has human shields, so therefore if we kill a civilian, it's Hamas's fault. That's a terrible logic, right?
Nope, that's a great logic. That's exactly how it works. That is how the rules of war are written. Yes.
Yes, but if this is Hamas and this is a person and I'm here and I want to kill Hamas, I know I have to go through this person. So I'm doing it intentionally. Like, yes, Hamas is using human shields. Yes, that's totally fucked up and they shouldn't do that. But also for Israel, in some cases, to kill Hamas, they are knowingly, necessarily going to kill civilians. So to say, well, our hands are tied, like, I understand, I empathize, like, obviously Hamas is evil. They should not use civilian shields, but it's also not fair to say, oh, we didn't mean to kill civilians. Like if you know they're using civilian shields, then by that logic, you know that you're killing civilians. Like don't lie, don't deny it, right?
Yeah, well, I don't think Israel does. They knowingly, yeah, of course. The question is if they intentionally are targeting civilians to kill civilians.
But it says callousness, so if Hamas is breaking the rules by using human shields, and then therefore Israel necessarily has to kill a lot of civilians in order to get to Hamas, and they're allowed to because of the rules of war, but say whatever you want about the rules of war. If you have to kill a bunch of civilians to kill Hamas, then maybe you shouldn't, then maybe you should take that into consideration.
It is taken into consideration. You can't kill like 1,000 civilians to kill one Hamas. There is some proportionality assessment that has to be done, but people forget that the rules of armed conflict exist to counterbalance two equally important things. One is the protection of civilian life that's not participating in combat. And two is the ability for countries to wage war. And if either one of these are threatened, then all of it falls apart. If you're allowed to kill civilians with impunity, well, then who cares about the laws of rules of armed conflict? Now you just have people murdering everybody. And on the flip side, though, equally important, if a country is so restricted by an enemy conducting war in a certain way that they can't conduct war, well, then they're not going to follow rules of war. They're going to say, fuck this, I'm just going to go bomb them then. If I'm going to break the law anyway, then who cares, right? So when it comes to human shields, it can't be the case that, well, as long as I shoot from behind a civilian or I store all my weapons, in Ahmed's basement and, he's just a random civilian with his whole family, we're good. It can't be that way because then every single organization, every single non-state actor in the world is going to start fighting those types of wars. And now you had everybody using human shields. So it can't be that way. It can't be that that's an automatic win button because everybody would abuse it.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. What do you make of I know you've been asked this before, you've responded to this before, but I want to ask you again. So what do you make of some of the claims by, and I can give the quotes, but Netanyahu, the ministers, Knesset, statements showing intent of ethnic cleansing?
It's stupid. What do you make of it? I think some of the statements that people make are irresponsible and dumb, and they shouldn't be. And maybe some of these even do borderline on some genocidal stuff. When you get over to the Smoltrich, and the other, God, fuck, my brain is all in America now. I've been doing domestic politics. There's the other far right guy that people always bring up from the super small party, Smoltrich, and
I thought they all had the same name.
Bro, it's, oh my God. Oh wait, you can just cut this out because we're not streaming.
Yeah, exactly.
Smotrich and Ben Giver, these two fucking lunatics. Yeah. there are statements that Smotrich and Ben-Gvir make that are unhinged, and they should be held accountable for that. But the issue we have right now is like the whole world just like forgot what like wars were, I guess. And now every single war is like a genocide or an ethnic cleansing, or people are saying that like Ukraine attacking into Russia, these are like terrorist attacks, like terrorism. It's a country attacking another fucking country at war. What the fuck? What?
Yeah.
So like this idea that we're going to be hyper ultra critical of every single statement made by a leader at war with another place is like, it's just silly to me. Like you can't surrender it during a genocide, right? Like if the idea that they're trying to genocide these people while also like moving around like millions of them to not kill them, so it's just stupid. I think it's like a childish accusation. But
well, I don't know what the accusation is, but I'm just saying I think there's something to be taken from it. Like
some of the rhetoric is bad, yeah, and maybe they should be punished for it. But this idea, like, it's genocide, it's ethnic cleansing. No, probably I don't think so. Not yet.
Right. Well, but it means something, right? Like if you have Netanyahu, the second in command, the third in command, ministers, Knesset, saying things about Amalek, we should take over North Gaza, quote, maybe we should drop an atomic bomb on Gaza, quote, there is no such thing as Palestinians because there's no Palestinian people, quote, Israel is for us and only us. Sorry for my long drawn out quote, but let me just say a couple more. So Yoav Gallant declared, quote, we are fighting human animals, we must act accordingly. I can go on and on and on.
You can go on. I would say you also knowing the source for all those is important too. A lot of those came from that ICJ thing, and I went through every single one of those. Some of those are not like that Yoav Gallant one. We're fighting human animals. Pretty sure that was in response to the ICJ. South Africa was trying to say in the ICJ, this is an example of genocidal intent. They don't even care about civilians. And what Yoav Gallant, I believe in that interview, if you go and you read the full thing, I think it's the Times of Israel interview, he's saying that if people are storing rockets in their basement, then I should be able to launch an attack against that goddamn house or whatever. I think he says something like that. But then he goes on to say, like 2 paragraphs later, obviously we're doing everything we can to follow the rules of war, but we're not going to, be defeated by an enemy that does blah, 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 right? So you can interpret it as like, well, this is over the line or it's not good, but he's clearly and obviously talking about Hamas when he's talking about this. He's not talking about just killing Palestinian civilians, at random or indiscriminately. So yeah, I mean, not like they aren't great statements, but like, damn, am I really going to put under a microscope every single thing a country at war is saying right now? Probably not. But
so what it makes me think is that what do you think about the general sentiment of the IDF toward the Palestinians?
It's given everything that's happened, I think it's probably about as good as you could expect it to be. I think that people overhype the fuck out of it. I don't think it's anywhere near as bad as people are saying it is. I think there have been some clear operational mistakes for sure. The WCK, I think the charity trucks that got bombed, that was wild and horrible and stupid. The World Central Kitchen trucks. There have definitely been issues where I don't know if the military is moving too fast or what, where they've made huge errors. But the idea that like just now they've decided today we're going to bomb and kill like these 7 civilians because fuck them. Just today we're going to do this, like give me a break. I think it's silly.
I guess the point I want to extract from the quotes is that without making a broader claim about necessarily how their motivations or emotions are affecting their actions, but I do think it's important to note what these leaders are saying because sorry to come back to empathy, but like if you look at if you view a people as being not people, you're going to treat them more likely like not people, like inhuman, and that's going to be reflected. And I think you'd agree that for there to be a solution, like Israelis need to respect Palestinians and vice versa.
That's true, but we need
the rhetoric gets in the way of that.
Yeah, I agree, but there needs to be empathy for both sides. Like, you just mega terrorist attack these people. Of course, they're going to be fucking mad, right? I don't want somebody talking to me about how, well, he's an Amalek, so he's genocidal, then going on some like 15 paragraph diatribe about how, well, when the Houthi flag says death to Israel, death to America, and death to Jews, they don't actually mean like death to the Jews. They just mean like Jews as in like the European colonial invasion. Like, fuck you. No, fuck off. Bullshit, right? I agree that empathy, I don't mean to you personally, but I'm just saying like, yeah.
Wait, do you take the statements on the Palestinian side literally, but not on the Israeli side?
No, I take them in the context of like what they're saying and what I think they're saying and what I think they mean when they say the things that they mean. I think it's generally pretty obvious with like a good reading of everything that's going on. Yeah.
So what does that mean? It's like, so my question is like, you just quoted the pro-Palestinian side,
the Houthi slogan or whatever.
So my question is like, what level, like how serious do you take those claims, and then compare that to how serious you take the quotes that I gave about the Israeli leaders? Like,
I don't live in quotes ever. And as soon as I started doing history, I hated that people that would give this one quote. Look at the context of everything that's happening, right? So, like, for instance, if you ask me about the Houthis, if the Houthis could, like, nuke Israel, like, would they do it? Maybe, but at the end of the day, the Houthis don't give a fuck about Israel. This is a family, a clan that's lived here for generations. They've been fighting here fucking forever. Like, the Houthis don't have some mission to blow up Israel, but they do want to stay on Iran's good side, and they do get support from Iran. And if that means, doing a little bit to help Iran's other friend out, Hamas, I think the Houthis will do it, right? I think that's how you interpret that. So, when I've argued with so many Israelis, it's like the whole world is trying to blow us up, and everybody's there's the 7 fronts. They start so many of them. I can't remember them all. They always talk about the 7 fronts, the 7 fronts. It's like, okay, then solve your fucking Palestinian problem, because this is your biggest issue, and it's why everybody's fucking mad at you, But the idea that there's like 7 countries or 7 huge fronts that are dedicated to the destruction of Israel, no matter what, like, probably not. Like, if you figure this problem out, a lot of this shit will change. The stuff with the Palestinians, like, you need to get some like actual deal or something on the ground with this. Yeah, I treat all the sides fairly, because I am the most fair person. So,
right. What's the solution?
We need a final. I'm just kidding. Something there has to be. Both sides need to feel like the onus is on them to figure something out. That's the issue. I think that without getting all historical, okay, Israel has benefited from being back against the wall and alone against the world, at least up until 73. And because of that, they have been very militarily successful and very diplomatically prudent. They have made wise decisions prior to and up to including 67, and then on their own until probably 73. And that's helped them. The Palestinians have never suffered a political defeat ever. The entire world keeps telling them that if they keep fighting and they keep resisting, they can go back to the borders. We call them the 67 borders, but we really mean like the borders like right after 48. And we really mean like maybe even more than that, depending on what you're talking about, right? People keep saying you can have these 67 borders, it's okay. You're going to get your own state, 100,000 refugees, 200,000 refugees. They got a bigger promise that the Clinton parameters were better than Camp David, and the Tava Summit was even more than the Clinton parameters. And the conversation between Mahmoud Abbas and the Prime Minister Olmert, everything is better. Just keep resisting, keep waiting. All these peace plans. If this was the case and you were told this, and you were Palestinian, why the fuck would you ever agree to anything except for everything? You're not going to make a deal. You're not going to agree on anything. You're going to keep kicking the can down the road and waiting to see what happens, right? So one, the Palestinians have been mind-fucked by the rest of the world. First, it was by the Arab states, okay? And then they abandoned the Palestinians. And now it's like by Iran and then the rest of the white people in the world. They're mind-fucked into thinking they should fight forever. And then meanwhile, Israel has a far right that is all too happy to entertain the Palestinian delusion. Because if the Palestinians want to keep fighting, well, then fine, we won't have peace, and we'll just kind of, keep moving more people into the West Bank and kind of annexing more territory. And you don't want us to annex territory? Well, why don't we sign the Abraham Accords, which is where those came from, by the way. This was a threat to annex more of the West Bank. So meanwhile, the right-leaning people and the messianic, hallucinogenic fucking Zionists who think they can take all of, Judea and Samaria back are getting what they want. So yeah, it just needs to stop. Okay. Palestinians need to think that they have to fucking figure their shit out. They can't fight forever. And Israeli people also need to figure their shit out too, and not think that they can keep fighting forever, because there are going to be consequences. Yeah, they're already happened.
Yeah. So they both have to be motivated to come to a solution, find
correct
peace or justice.
And right now, there's no reason for either side to. Israel is winning. They keep getting more land. They keep annexing more territory. They keep moving in more settlers. And Palestinians have never suffered a true political defeat. They can always look to the 67 borders.
Really?
Yet yeah. What do you mean? They still think...
What do you mean defeated? Look at Palestine today. It's not in good shape, right?
Yeah, but what are they looking forward to? The 67. Have you ever heard a Palestinian leader say, okay, well, fuck, we've lost a lot. Fine. East Jerusalem, that's off the table. Okay, fine. No more Al-Aqsa, no more Temple Mount, no more Old City. We give that up. You're right. You fucked us on that, okay? But let's at least no, of course not. They want everything. That's not going to happen. We have to, yeah. Both sides' expectations are just massively overinflated.
Why does wanting everything mean they haven't suffered a political defeat?
Because they haven't been forced to. Have you ever heard of a realized gain? You ever do investing?
Yeah.
Yeah, there are no realized losses or realized gains. They're just, it's like, okay, we can always go back to, no matter how bad things get, we can always go back to the 67 borders when it comes time to make a deal.
Well, they've suffered defeat. They just, you're saying is they haven't recognized it.
Yeah, there's no lasting
They've still
defeat.
suffered.
Yeah, but they'll it'll all come back eventually. Just the next deal, we're going to get even more. This is delusional.
Yeah.
It's not good.
Yeah. And both sides have to want to find a solution to work. So shifting gears and winding down, how did you learn to learn? Like, what is your background exactly? I know you've spoken about this, but when did you become so intellectually curious to the point that you become this knowledgeable about a topic, and passionate about it? Like, when did that form? How did that form?
I think there's just a lot of lucky things that came together. I took a really good psych class when I was in school, and it taught me a lot about not trusting my brain, because your brain does a lot of weird things. So I've always exercised a lot of epistemic humility. And then on top of that, I stream politics. So I've got an infinite amount of criticism, so I can like forge through the flames of hellish internet debate, solid, consistent arguments. I've got a huge amount of people, experts and stuff to draw from, right? I can go to Israel and talk to so many cool people just because of like how wide my fan base is. Like, I have everything available to me on my fingertips. And for some reason, I have the epistemic humility to utilize those and then deploy those in really positive ways. So,
and that your answer kind of tells the story of how you've become successful. But my question is even more fundamental. Like, when did you develop a passion for becoming knowledgeable about a topic like this? Was it in your political streaming that you got interested in topics? Or
yeah, probably, yeah, because I had the time to like, especially I got a formal ADHD diagnosis finally, and I just started
Mazel tov.
Yeah. About a year ago, and I started Vyvanse, and then October 7th happened, and this was like my first time where I've been able to sit down and like read a full book or read full articles or read, these 130-page UN decisions or whatever, or ICJ decisions or UN reports. So that's helped a lot too, and like actually letting me flesh out my information a lot.
But when you started streaming is when you were streaming on political content,
I started streaming video games. I was a pro StarCraft player way back in 2010 is when I started.
And during those streams, you would talk about politics, no?
Yeah, I would, but nowhere near the depth that I do now. Yeah.
When did you get into the depth that you do now?
2016 is when I started to do politics full time. I would say that like COVID and the vaccine stuff is when I really started to dive into like actually reading like full studies.
Yeah.
So, like, and then Ukraine and Russia, yeah.
What made you so interested to dive that deep and to, like me, for example, I was curious about COVID. So I read an article in the Wall Street Journal, and then I read one on CNN, and then I'm like, okay, I think I get it. And then but you had a passion and an interest to not just understand the issue, but to really understand the issue. That's what I'm trying to understand.
I mean, it's probably a combination of like, I'm very confrontational and I like debating. It's really fun for me. And if I learn a little bit about an issue and I start arguing with people about it and I think they're wrong, it just drives me to, read and study and learn more about it. And at some point, I would say, especially for the Israeli history, that's probably the first time, man, it's so funny. If you go back a year into my stream and you watch me do politics all from 2016 to 2024, or end of 2023, I hated history. And I said it a lot. History sucks. Fuck history. It's boring. It's for losers. Who cares? But actually being able to sit down and read stuff from start to finish, the history of Israel is just really cool. There's a lot of really cool figures. That the Menachem Begin and the crazy fucking glasses and that dude's whole life. This guy fucking fought and was fought by fucking everybody, right? He escaped the Nazis to come to Israel and have fucking Begin, shooting cannons at him as he's part of the fucking terrorist wing of the Irgun and shit. He's just got a really crazy life. And reading about the life of seeing how Sadat basically died to do peace with Israel. Like, there's just so many cool figures involved. The stories are really cool. The interests of all the parties are really cool. Like, yeah, once you can sit down and like start absorbing and learning more information, they're all like very human stories, right? Like, there's a lot of drama in history. It's the story of humanity. What could be more dramatic than that? You just have to be willing to sift through a lot to start to kind of like understand, like, oh shit, like this is actually really cool that this guy did this, or it's crazy that this guy on TV, called out Sadat. It's the fact, like, I can't imagine the feeling in Israel and in the Knesset when Sadat is speaking before the Knesset the first time ever. You get this Arab leader, right, of a country that was headed by Nasser, who wanted to lead the whole Arab world in war against Israel. Now the Egyptian leader is coming to talk in front of the Israeli parliament. It's crazy. You just need like the background, I guess, to appreciate it. Yeah. I think it's interesting and cool. Yeah.
Awesome. And by the way, just quick, I promise I'll wrap up when this before, like, I won't take your whole night. Okay. I'm very like, yeah. Okay. So what do you want conservatives to know that they don't know?
About what?
What do you want them to know? What's the number one thing?
I wish that they just knew that not everybody that wasn't part of their MAGA movement wasn't trying to destroy the fucking world, right?
Okay.
Most of the people in the military, most of the people in the FBI, most of the people in the State Department and the government, most of these are good people, even people like Fauci. Most of these are just good people just trying to do their job and do what they think is best. There's not like a grand conspiracy around every fucking corner where everybody's coming to get you and the whole world is trying to like destroy children and whatever the fuck else. Like most people are trying to do the right thing.
Wasn't there, I don't know the truth to this. Maybe you can educate me. Wasn't there something fishy that did actually happen with COVID and Fauci and something that came out in the House committee? No, it's all bullshit.
Yep.
On the All In podcast, they were talking about it. This is where I get my information. Podcast. No, they're the bigger question I have there about the All In podcast is that you have some successful people who seem like smart people who are not. They haven't been seduced by the Trump's however he's infected everyone else's mind, and yet they're still very pro-Trump. You know, there are smart, successful people who are pro-Trump. How do you explain that?
You can learn a lot about a thing and not have good intellectual epistemic practice, and then you can be real dumb in other things. Ben Carson believed that gay people. Ben Carson thought that straight people went to prison and then chose to be gay. And Ben Carson was also one of the leading neurosurgeons in the world that pioneered the separation of conjoined twins at the brain in surgery. So, I mean, like, this is a guy who's one of the most talented neurosurgeons in the world who believes the dumbest shit possible about homosexuality. So, I mean, like, it happens. Yeah.
There was a whole there's a whole Republican narrative that there was something fishy with what was it? Like there was some emails deleted by Fauci's guy. That's all horseshit.
I don't know. I'd have to go and look at this particular thing. But generally, every time I chase down one of these, it's bullshit. So, you know.
Okay. And then final question. What advice do you have for me, new podcaster?
What advice do I have for you?
Quit while I'm ahead.
Quit while you're at. No, I don't know. Consistency. Figure out what you offer uniquely that other people don't, and then whatever you can do that you feel like other people on the internet can't do that people want to watch you for. Do that more than anybody else as much as you can.
All right. So I'll get into porn. All right. Well, thanks for your time. If we can, I'm gonna end the recording. Maybe we can wrap up for a couple minutes.
Yeah.
Cool. Let me. You're up late, man.